Welcome to Digital Currents, brought to you by Morgan Creek Digital. I'm Xavier Segura. Each episode, we spotlight the topics and people changing the tech industry with a focus on AI, blockchain, chips, and big data. Thanks for listening, and please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
Mark, we're back for a holiday episode, and we're just laughing to each other. Just what a cluster it's been this AM, but that's not going to stop us from standing.
That's right. The show must go on. We are wearing our Easter colors. Happy Good Friday, everybody. A little light blue and a little lavender for a little Easter egg hunt this weekend. The morning has been crazy. Computers being wonky. Yours is locked in the car.
Yeah.
The quick reveal. I do have the Bitcoin orange on today. I have the, just chill. So we're telling everybody, just chill. It'll all be good. It'll all be fine. And, the Chilly Willy socks are a good thing this morning.
I mean, Mark, that's probably the phrase that you and I both needed to hear, is just to chill and relax, because I feel like, it's very much where we have been over the last couple of quarters as, one administration comes out, another one comes in, 1 year exits, another year enters, and we're kind of very much so in a similar place in terms of where some market prices are, but how we got there was anything but similar, right? So we had basically this whole trade war that's been happening in the background, and yet, when we look at what's going on here stateside with some of the tech companies, a lot of stories we want to talk about, but really this idea that U.S. versus China, I'm hoping, Mark, that there'll be a Rocky 8, except this time Rocky is like now 70 and he's going against some like younger, fitter Chinese boxer.
I actually thought that's a really good idea. And, look, the nonsense of we must have an enemy in order to be great, it's all about the money. It's all about, selling more bombs. Not that we're going to go to war with China. Here's an amazing stat. Mm-hmm. So in the last 80 years, we have spent $60 trillion on wars and bombs and airplanes and aircraft carriers as a country. And China's not gone to war once. Not had any aggression over that time. So their similar amount of money, I don't know what the exact number is, has gone into what? Infrastructure, roads, bridges, high-speed rail. Like, we still don't have any high-speed rail in the United States. And so there's this difference in, look, when we had the Cold War with China, with Russia when I was growing up, the Soviet Union, and that was with the Rocky movie, right?
Drago.
Gall. And, okay, fine. That was all a big thing. And you got the, the moon landing stuff. Okay, fine. But the idea that China's somehow our enemy is just ridiculous.
Right.
They don't view themselves that way. They view themselves as a country that has elevated themselves out of abject poverty, right? It was a very poor, they had the 200-year mistake. So 1800 years, unbelievable, center of the universe, Marco Polo, Silk Road, China pretty much invented everything. They invented money, flying money in 1300 and
gunpowder, right? 1500s.
I mean, exactly. I mean, it was amazing. And then, they had this mistake with communism, and they lost 200 years, right? Almost as long as our country's been alive. And now for the last 60-odd years, they've been in this new, what they call the harmonious rise. That's not aggressive. That's not negative. And it's been amazing to watch, right? I mean, they took basically the entire population of the U.S. and Europe combined and took them out of poverty into the middle class. And now they're And in doing so, what did they do? Well, they did the same thing we did in the 1800s, in the early 1900s. We were poor and we worked really hard and we worked in sweatshops and we, built all this stuff and sent it to the rich people in Europe. That's how it worked. And then we became wealthy and now we are the superpower, right?
Sure.
We're the wealthiest nation on earth by some measures. We are the most technologically advanced, other than this morning you and I having our tech problem. And, totally first world problems, but there's this idea that we need to have them as the enemy.
Right.
When now they're evolving from, 20 years ago, the air in Beijing, it was toxic. I mean, you couldn't see, like you'd walk out of your hotel and you couldn't see back to the hotel to know where to go. And you'd get sick and it was horrible. Now you go to Beijing, skies are blue, clouds are out, city's gleaming, there's, lights every, I mean, it's glorious. And you can get on a train and go, 200 kilometers an hour anywhere you want. Right. So I just find this whole thing kind of nonsensical. And I've been doing this series. So in COVID, in lockdowns, I ended up doing a series of not podcasts, but webinars every week for, I think I did for 32 weeks. And I didn't intend to do that, but I did the first one and people were like, we got nothing else to do. Why don't you do it again? Okay. And it wasn't that they really wanted to hear me talk. It was something to engage in. And it so happened that 11 of those 30 weeks, I was on this long road trip as we were going from North Carolina to California to see my first grandkid born. And my wife was like, we're not missing that. And I don't care if we can't fly. So we're driving. And it was actually really cool because, different people treated it differently. And, my favorite part was when we got to Oklahoma, where my wife's family's from, COVID didn't exist. Like, wow. We had been in places on the way to Oklahoma. People were fully masked up. They were not going outside. They were hunkered down and the world was ending. You get to Oklahoma, they're like sipping coffee at Starbucks. Like, what are you talking about? Why are you wearing that stupid thing on your face? I mean, it was hilarious. And then you get to California. Oh my God. I mean, they're like, literally they would shoot you. I mean, not really, but it felt like they would shoot you if you went out in public. Yeah. So it was bizarre. But anyway, so I've been doing this series now on tariffs. And I didn't intend to become like knowledgeable about tariffs because the punchline of this, I'll keep the story short, is tariffs. We actually have a lot of data on tariffs. We actually have 249 years of data on tariffs because the first 140 years of the Republic,
right,
all of the revenue for government was tariffs. From 1776 to 1913, there was no income tax. All of government revenue, everything that was paid for, which is very small, the percentage of government as part of your life was pretty small, but all of it was covered by tariffs. And the percentage and the use of tariffs starting in the 1700s had been falling. Okay. 1823, it had a rise and we went into depression. Mm-hmm. So they went away. And then in 1929, they rose again and we went into depression. Like literally, we've tried mass tariffs twice in our history, one in 1823, one in 1930, and now again. Mm-hmm. The first two, we went into depression. But this time, X, it's going to make us rich, according
to... Yeah, right. That's the most dangerous phrase we always talk about, Mark, in finance. But this time really is different, right? And we'll throw another one out, which I quoted last week, my high school yearbook. The more things seem to change, the more they seem to stay the same. Yeah. We had one administration go out and try to impose restrictions from technology standpoint on AI processing chips, right? And there was a lot of criticism. We spoke about it. We were trying to figure out what this could mean for the industry. right? And then, the new administration comes in, some of those things are immediately lifted. And now there is, basically talk to reinstate some of these bans on the most advanced AI chips because it's in the face of 145% tariff on China. But what this is going to mean is little startups, well, I guess they're not so little anymore, Mark, but I always think about DeepSeek as a little startup. There's outright ban. They come after TikTok, and there's some rationale for that. And then now there's an idea to come for DeepSeek. And what that'll mean is the rise of Chinese AI infrastructure, right? This is the butterfly effect because innovation is uncapped, it's borderless. And just like we saw with the reluctance in the US to adopt electric cars, that allowed folks like China to really push into this industry because there was no dominant US player until Tesla came along, obviously.
Yep.
And how many great, Chinese car brands are there on the electric side, right? Half a dozen? I mean, at least a dozen?
Unbelievable. And BYD, to that point, which Warren Buffett owns, by the way, which is kind of funny,
Wow.
Is not just a battery company. They make electric cars that, and look, Tesla's a very nice car, especially the S-Class. The smaller ones I don't love. It's like getting in a Mazda with an iPad. Yeah. But the big S-Class Teslas are very luxurious. They're very cool. But these new BYDs,
oh yeah,
they're literally like mobile offices and palaces. And they're like, you could live in this. I'm like, no, let's not start that. We don't want people living in their wonderful cars, but
that's the opposite of luxury, living in your car, right?
Yeah, I mean, so but BYD is, Tesla stock's been going like this, BYD stock's been going like this,
right.
And if you look at the two products, you're like, yeah, that's better. It's kind of like what Lexus did to some of the other brands here in the U.S. when they came out with this. Remember when Lexus was like the ultimate luxury car,
right?
And it was like, really?
Yeah, because Lexus showed us that they knew the American consumer better than the American consumer, right? Because we saw this innovation in the 70s, these big guzzlers, the long lines. I wasn't there, but I remember reading about and looking at it online. And then what happened? Then there was the rise of the East, right? So all these small cars come in, but they were economy cars. So they were kind of capped in that market. So then what does Honda do? What does Toyota do? No. We're going to give you a Toyota, but we're going to make it twice as expensive, and we're going to call it a Lexus, and we're going to kind of change a little bit. But the engine's the same. The transmission is the same.
Except it's funny. The first time I got in a Lexus, I worked for this insurance company, and the senior guys, they made a lot of money. That was, the insurance business pays executives a lot. And long story short, this guy bought a Lexus, like one of those first big, I think it was like the 450 or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not exaggerating.
50.
You get in, and when you close a good car door,
right?
You hear that, boom.
Right, there's a heft.
And you feel like the air, like compresses.
Right.
Oh, my God. What? And so he starts driving, and there's no sound.
Wow.
I mean, there's no engine noise. There's no wind noise. And I'm used to my old Ford Bronco, like rattling and the wind's like blowing through the seams in the windshield. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what craftsmanship is. That and other car companies have replicated that. But it was unbelievable how much better.
Mm-hmm.
And that was from when the first Toyota Camry came over here, or the Corolla.
Right.
They were literally joked as clown cars, those little mini cars where all the clowns would come out at the circus. And they were. I mean, I look at the original Honda Civic. I'm not sure you and I could both get in that.
No. We'd have to have a window open at a minimum, right? And I think this kind of emphasizes the point, Mark, that you made last week, fresh off the return from Japan. The pursuit of excellence and mastery in a particular craft. And, the description of those early Lexus models, they're so over-engineered, and many of them are still on the road today.
Yeah.
And, at the antithesis of this was the Ford Pinto, right? Or the many other bumpers that would fall off of cars when you get hit from behind. It was a real disaster. And I think, what we're looking at now is this showdown, right? This East and West showdown on the tech side. But where do startups, sit in this as they try to figure out, where do you pick
you
stocks?
nailed it. And it said, so a week ago, okay, we did our first show after a couple week hiatus, my hiatus. You were doing it, but so we did the show on Friday.
Right.
On Sunday, and the world was kind of dicey a week ago. On Sunday, magically, right? Apple, NVIDIA, AMD, I can't remember the other one, were exempt from the tariff.
Mark, imagine that. Did we see that coming? I don't know if we saw that coming.
And it was funny, on the, I think it was on the Thursday, they asked President Trump, well, how are you going to determine gets the exemptions? Oh, instinctively.
Right.
So then from Sunday morning when it got announced, it's always on Sundays, to Sunday evening when Asian markets opened, these things were on fire. I mean, totally in fuego. But then Monday morning, same guy wakes up and says, no, you should
remind
NVIDIA, those chips, that's national security. You can't export not only your high-end chip, which you can't really produce enough of to export anyway, but that aside, even that next level chip, that H100, nope, you can't send those out. Stock's down, at one point, it was down like 14%.
Wow.
Intraday. So it was up, I think, 5 or 6% overnight, down so a 20%, I mean, this is a multi-trillion-dollar company.
Right, the biggest company in the world. Yeah.
Like a penny stock. And so, and it's because of this nonsense of, well, if you provide those chips, then they'll build stuff. No, they already built it. This is, and we've talked about this, right? This is the scene from Iron Man. He built it in a cave with spare parts. And your question is, where do the startups come from? Yeah. Startups work best in scarcity.
Yeah.
Right? When they don't have too much money. Like if you give a startup too much money, what will they do? They'll buy Super Bowl ads.
Exactly.
That's a bad idea. If you don't give them a lot of money, what'll they do? Well, they won't advertise at all. They'll build a really good product and they'll scrape together new and innovative ways. And what those kids, and they are kids, and I mean that in a loving way. I mean, they are children at DeepSeek did. They're like, I can't get the chips, so I can't brute force it. So I have to elegantly engineer a way to, well, what if I sample some of the other models that are brute forcing, and then I train my models with the sample? That might work. It actually worked really well. And so now you're doing what always happens in innovation, and where the startups, and this is what Mark Andreessen talked about in 2000, right? Software's eating the world. And what he meant by that was not like, it's going to destroy everything. What it's doing is it's taking ideas that we would all like to have, like the vision. That's what entrepreneurship is, about having a vision and then moving toward it. And the first way with any vision is stuff, right? I want to hack down that tree. I'm going to get a big old axe and I'm going to go hack it down. It's really hard. Okay, well, what if I engineered a better tool, better hardware? Right. So hardware gets a little better. Well, then you're like, well, what if I had a better way of doing this, like not manually, but having a machine? And I'm sure you've seen the video of this amazing log cutter where it's like an automated thing and it grabs the tree.
Oh, yeah.
Slices it, and then it strips all the branches off, and then it puts it on the truck.
It reminds me of those old Looney Tune cartoons now that, we're in this kind of young child phase, that reminds me of just the inefficiency of, sometimes they'll just grab an entire tree and then a box of toothpicks will come out on the other end.
Exactly. No, exactly. And so, but that innovation is in the physical world.
Right.
It was all about brute force and hydraulics, but it was engineering. In the software world, we can make the hardware better, right? I'm old enough to remember, right? I got my first job because I was the only guy at the company, this insurance company, that could operate a spreadsheet. Like literally, we had just gone from VisiCalc to Lotus 123. No one else at the company knew how to even log in and create a spreadsheet. So like, wow, you recent graduate from business school, you do it. Great. That was good. I had job security. And then Excel came out later and the software kept getting better. Now, we've gotten to the point now with like Excel where it's just bloatware. It's just not that great. But the original innovation made us more productive, and it meant you could spend more time doing other stuff. And this is why I love our job, right? We get to talk all the time to these, and they're mostly young minds that are thinking about problems and saying, well, I don't have the way to brute force it. Mm-hmm. So let me come up with a better way of design or, software approach. And in some cases, it iterates on itself. So let's say our portfolio company, Niobium, is a great example. So this thing called fully homomorphic encryption. So having data encrypted is superior to not having it encrypted, right?
Right.
It's more safe.
Much more safe.
Just safe. So what they figured out is encrypted at each endpoint. That's easy. Even sending end to end through a messaging app like Telegram. Okay, that's easy. But the problem is when you store it and you want to work on it, you can't really keep it encrypted.
Yeah.
So these software engineers, Zama and other places, said, well, we could write some fancy software and we can accelerate the opening and closing of those encrypted files. So it's harder to penetrate the veil and steal the data. And market cap went up. And that's really interesting. But then I'm like, well, but that acceleration isn't enough. And so the software on the old hardware is good. It's better, but it's not enough. So you need to innovate the hardware. And so that's what Niobium and Kornami and a few others.
You're trying to reach that efficient frontier, Mark, right, at the end of the day, because you can basically have to make a trade-off for speed and security. And it kind of reminds me with TSMC, another company we talk about a little bit of this. I don't know. I feel like they're a little bit of this canary in the coal mine. I mean, literally, they are right there in the middle, Mark. So I'm sure you saw the numbers in Q1. They blew it out of the park, right? So despite, some slowdowns and some of the things that we're talking about, I mean, year over year, Mark, I'll just quote you some of the numbers. They had $25 billion in revenue and a net income of $11 billion, which is 35% and 60% year over year growth. All right. And, we'll see what happens in Q2 because then you can really see what happens with some of this, broader macro. But this is speaking to the point that there is still demand because there are only so many companies because of the time that it takes to create this infrastructure and then to have the proper testing of the software that can reach that efficient frontier. So you're kind of in this point where you can't just flip off the light switch and say, we're going to solar, right? Forget electricity. But you don't have solar panels. You don't have the infrastructure. You don't even have the,
It's a minor, it's a nit. Well, the other problem, solar's great. And one of my favorite stats on that is in a single day, 24 hours, enough energy hits the Earth's surface, right? Rotates around the globe, hits the Earth's surface to power the entire world's energy needs for 1 year.
Wow.
Now, well, then why do we have all these, other, fossil fuels, which actually aren't fossils, but why do we have all this other stuff? Well, because we don't have the solar panels to actually capture. And the problem is half the time, your solar panels aren't collecting energy because they're in the dark, because you're on the wrong side of the circle. And so we don't know how to transfer the energy from Europe to the U.S., nor should we. So what we got to make sure is when the sun is shining, we convert it to energy and then store it. But we just don't have enough batteries yet. And but we're making improvements and we're getting better. But that's just one form of energy. There's other forms of energy. I mean, I was just with a guy actually just, before we got together. Well, interesting guy, Duke, even though I'm Carolina Blue guy, he's a Duke guy. And Duke engineers are pretty smart. But this guy literally wrote his master's thesis on generating electricity using waves, like ocean waves. Because if you think about a continual motion machine, there aren't that many. I mean, wind kind of comes and goes, sun comes and goes. Ocean waves, 100% all the time. Even when the sea's flat, underneath, and that was his big thing, is that underneath the surface is all the noise that you don't see. Like most of us think an ocean wave is, oh, this beautiful sine wave. He's like, no. It's very, very noisy underneath, and we can harness that. And so they created, it's pretty cool. They created a series of buoys that just go up and down, but they pull cables on pulleys that generate electricity. Genius, right? And so there are a lot of systems like that smart engineers can figure out, I think that's a good idea. But in this innovation cycle, and again, why we talk about the ABCD every week, why we spend our livelihood focused on the ABCD, AI, blockchain, chips, data, is the mechanical world is great. And there's lots of innovation in the mechanical world, and there's lots of tech venture funds, and there's lots, and great. And they're actually building new stuff like this, wave electricity generator. That's an interesting new thing. There's plenty of people to provide capital for that. And there's plenty of people to do financial services stuff and, the next social media and, Chime and, old stuff just made better with a better UI UX. That's fine too. Nothing wrong with that. But what's cool about where we are in this movement from analog to electronic to digital, as we go from offline, where I grew up, to online, where, my kids' generation, my older kids' generation grew up, to now digital, my grandkids' generation, is that digital world that we're beginning to live in and we're going to live in is going to be fundamentally different and changed because of AI tools, because of these chip enhancements, these chip performances, new materials. That's another cool thing, right? Is silicon has been amazing. And I actually do want to research this. It's interesting to me, who was the first person who actually kind of figured out that, if we heat up this sand into this crucible, which I found out during the hurricanes was made here in North Carolina, Spruce Grove or Spruceville, this quartz, which doesn't melt at the heat that you need to melt the silicon. And they produce 99.9% of it in the world, right here in North Carolina. And every semiconductor company needs it. So when they got washed out in the hurricane, it was kind of a problem. But long story short is that creation is pretty mind-blowing to think that you can incite electrons to move in certain ways, and then you can create a transistor. And think about that. In 1955, I think it was 55, one transistor. Early in 55, maybe it was 4. It doesn't matter what. But one transistor in a chip. Now we have, last check, 8 billion.
Right.
I mean, stunning.
Yeah, and I think through that all, Mark, TSMC is still projecting growth for Q2. So I think what your point is that amongst, a lot of things is that the world is going to continue whether or not tensions are there, because the human need for sending more photos, for talking to people on video conferencing, for driving to destinations using Google Maps. Mark, my
They're watching us every week on digital currency. They review and rate, review, and subscribe. I mean, all of those things.
That's right.
Require technology.
That's right.
And I loved China's response to the nonsense this week, where we went from 145% tariffs to 245%. Because if 145 is good, then 240. They're like, dude, anything over the 100 is just silly. Because at 100, you're basically saying that business is embargoed, right?
Right.
Like, there's not going to be any business. If you're a mom and pop store in the United States and your tchotchkes from China show up at the border and you got to pay 2x,
Right.
you're done, right? You're out of business. That you're done. You're not going to pay that. And this nonsense that, well, China's going to pay it. Nope. No, that's not the way it works. Tariffs are a tax
Yeah, that's right.
on the user.
Right.
And the fallacy of this whole thing is, he wants to abolish the income tax and replace it with tariffs, because that's what we did from 1776 to 1913. Okay. Couple problems. One, we were an agrarian society. We were not a consumer society.
Mhm.
So in agrarian society, we made stuff, right? We grew wheat and corn and cotton, and we traded amongst each other, and we weren't globalized. We were a little emerging market that, we had seen. Remember, we created our country because of tariffs on tea. I mean, minor nit, but that's true. And so it's a different world. And government, for most of that period, was voluntary. You did your 2 years as a volunteer, then you went back to your farm to run it.
Mhm.
And there were no permanent politicians, and there was no big lobbying, and we didn't have the robber barons yet. The robber barons were created, okay, by the second set of tariffs in the 1930s. And they replaced tariffs with income tax, the same way the feudal lords in the 1500s and 1600s around the world did the same thing with the peasants, right? The peasants had to pay a tax and usually part of their harvest, to the feudal lords, and they were the original robber barons. And then we had the, John D. Rockefellers and the J.P. Morgans and that cadre of robber barons. I love this part. It's like, robber baron. That's not a term of endearment, right?
It's very directly.
It's not like saying, hey, you're a really nice guy. Yet we look back now, like, oh, Cornelius Vanderbilt, he must have been a very great guy because the Vanderbilt Foundation. And like, no, he really, and John D. Rockefeller.
Yeah, I remember hearing a stat about that, Mark, that the size of Standard was the equivalent of Fang combined, right? In one company way back 100 years ago.
So many things. I mean, the antitrust laws of today exist because he was violating all of them.
Right.
And dual entry accounting and all kinds of stuff, Financial Accounting Standards Board. It's because he was the most ruthless businessman maybe ever. I mean, Gates and a few others have been pretty ruthless along the way, but if you read the book Titan, I mean, again, just not a nice person, really good businessman. And I think in today's dollars, I think he's either first or second richest. I think there's some guy from Asia that when they adjust, I think from like the 1500s, when they adjust for inflation, he ends up being the richest person in history. But again,
so Mark, changing gears just slightly, there was a new report that came out from Binance, and they were talking much more deep dive about Ethereum. So the reason I'm bringing this up, as we think about innovation that's going on, AI, we kind of have seen what the impacts of tariffs are, but I think there's an impact on tariffs that's also happening within our world, right? So when we think about Bitcoin, Everybody knows it's the oldest, it's the most well-known, it's the most respected by institutional investors. So that gap between number one and used to be number two, I joked and I said it was kind of like the old, Big Ten conference, the Big Two, Little Eight. You can't even say that anymore. It's just the big one, right? It's Bitcoin is so far ahead of these guys.
Yeah.
And the question is, why that is. Well, there's a flight to quality that we've seen around markets. But then also the other question is, well, why has ETH fallen so much? Because for a while it was unclear, if Ethereum could even be bigger than Bitcoin. There was an argument to be made it can do more things for technology.
The flippening.
All right. So then this report alleges, Mark, and I'm curious your thoughts. Some of the things we've been saying around the Morgan Creek calls, that Ethereum was a victim of its own success in the sense that it was very interoperable. It was kind of the opposite of Bitcoin in that it was built to upgrade. So as a result, immediately you had this L2 activity, basically other chains building directly off of ETH to handle sending other information, scaling, accrual, and most importantly, to reduce the transaction fee, the gas fee that was so kind of cost prohibitive towards doing a lot more things on ETH. Well, now ETH has gotten better. It's been upgraded, and it's actually only around 17 cents per transaction. Not necessarily because just of the improvement on the technology, which is way better, but also because market demand, Mark, has dropped off so much that people are just doing way less there, and they're going to L2. So curious. We spent a lot of time sort of poking at the other alts in like XRP and Sol, but little old ETH has kind of been forgotten. Do you have any sense, kind of, with this report saying that L2s are kind of really to blame here? Is it that? Is it a macro, or is it something else that ETH will never be?
I think you're right. It is very similar to the tariff issue, that the way ETH was set up was gas fees, right? You had these tariffs essentially that had to be paid, and it actually was elegant. If you're going to use the network, pay for it, kind of like a toll on a toll road. Mm-hmm. So that made some sense. And when it was the only option, pretty good. Like if there's only one road and you got to pay a toll, you're going to take that road. If you got two or three roads, it depends. If you're in a hurry, you're going to take the toll road. If you got time, it's right here in North Carolina, like right down the road from here. So I got the main highway,
right,
Highway 40, and I can take that for free. If I want to take the faster, because one thing they do well in North Carolina, they tax us, but they build amazing roads. Like we have amazing roads in the middle of nowhere. Like it's almost like China. I mean, there are these gleaming roads between two cities you've never heard of in northeastern North Carolina, because we have really good tax usage to build the roads. But they made this one between two places, that a lot of people are going now, the beach, and it's a good half hour faster. Or if like an accident happens on that, there still is the old 55-54, which is windy and through the woods and it takes forever, but you can still get where you're going. So you kind of have three choices. And depending on if you're in a hurry, if you're, cheap like me and you don't want to pay the toll, but Mark, it's like $4. I'm like, no, it's $4 I don't need to spend. That's a couple.
Oh, Mark. Growing up, there was a similar idea. I grew up north of Manhattan. So I'd go in with my father every week. We'd go to Chinatown, do a lot of father-son bonding. It was amazing. However, going in there were multiple ways to go in, and we never took the tollway. Now with the congestion tax,
yes,
my dad never goes to Manhattan.
No, exactly.
I'm not going.
No, and that's the point. So if the toll is fair, right, people will still use it. And if it's the only choice, they'll use it. And when it was the only choice, everyone used ETH. And we've asked this question on this show before, right? That if ETH didn't exist and was invented today, right, would anyone use it? And then, what do you mean? Well, Solana is faster and cheaper, and Sui is faster and cheaper, and there's a few other L2s that are faster and cheaper. Right. And so if you think about it, if I'm on this road and it gets me where I need to go and it's cheaper, why would I take this equivalent road and pay more and it's a little bit slower? So like if it was faster, I might pay extra, right? Like if I'm going to take that tollway and I'm going to get there a half hour faster, that's worth $4. My time's probably worth some money. So, okay. But if it's slower, if I got to pay to stay on 40, wrong. No. And so I think that's what you started to see. Now, part of the problem is if every time you get on that toll road, there's a sinkhole, because they didn't level out so you literally get stopped.
Right.
Solana problem is when it gets too congested, it literally,
Great analogy.
there's a sinkhole.
That's a great analogy.
Right. There's too much weight and so now you're not getting to the beach. And
I mean,
so
at a minimum, the road is many things, but at a minimum, the road is a way to get to the destination. If it blocks you, it ceases being a road, right?
exactly. By definition, it ceases being a road. And so, but all of this goes to, and look, I got a lot of trouble with the Solana crowd when I said that the first time, and they're like, "Oh, we don't vaporize, we never roll back the chain, we don't vaporize." I'm like, I didn't say you roll back the chain. I said that sometimes transactions go, but they don't get settled. And if you don't, well, so you could resend it. I'm like, well, do you think I'm really paying attention if it settled or not? I'm assuming it got settled. So if I don't resend it, then it gets vaporized. So will we fix that? And it was better this last time. 5 years ago, it was pretty bad.
Right.
Last year, when we had that big bull run in November, December, it broke down again. It didn't break down as often, but it broke down. And so, but they'll keep tweaking it. They'll keep making improvements and it'll get better. But then other competitors will come along and it's kind of like, I don't know if you've seen these new maglev trains.
Oh yeah, they're incredible.
A train on a track, you can go certain speed, and that's what we have in America, and then high speed rail. Places in a couple places in Europe and a bunch of places in Japan, and then a lot of places in China have figured out that you can go super fast if the track is super straight and it's kind of canted in the. But that's harder to engineer, right? Cost more money. Well, now they're like, well, what if we use magnets?
Right.
And the train is literally like elevated, not very high, but it's not touching the track. And like, no friction.
Right.
Wow, it could go super fast.
Right. Nowhere, no noise. I mean, it is literally the future, Mark. And I'll have to break the news to the listeners. Due to the technical issues, we're going full analog, Mark. I've got my paper handy printed in color. And instead of the chart of the week, we are going to, as we lead up to our 100th episode, speaking of this, your anecdote about recording in COVID, it has not felt like 100. I am very comfortable doing this until folks say no. But with that, I will turn the tables for you, Mark, and give you a lightning round set of questions based on our podcast in lieu of the chart of the week. Okay. So this one I thought was really cool and funny. What is the first thing you do once you stop recording?
The first thing I do once I stop recording?
Yeah. First thing.
Probably go to the bathroom.
Yeah. The bathroom. Okay, great. Yeah, very practical, very practical. And what would you say you always have nearby when recording?
Cafe.
Excellent. Yeah, I've always kind of
that and the iPhone to check data. So I do check data in real time occasionally. So
right. I wonder if your answer to this one matches mine, because I have an answer pre-planned in my head. What was the most unexpected answer a guest has ever given?
Ooh, most unexpected answer. Holy moly.
As you give yourself a time to think about that, I'll interject, and maybe this will kind of get some of the ideas flowing. But Mark, I have to think back to one of our earlier episodes when we had Pascal on from.
That's where I was headed.
Ledger.
I was headed to Pascal for sure.
Basically, anything that he said was unexpected.
Yeah.
So just that whole for me. But was there one that stuck out for you? And
No, look, I think it was very unexpected to learn that he dropped out of school.
oh yeah,
And look, and there are lots of stories of people who drop out of traditional education and become super successful. But that was unexpected. I think some other things that he did that were unexpected, just the fact that he was the classic story of the guy said no, and I didn't take no for an answer, and I just kept asking and kept badgering, and I finally did get a job because no one would give him a job. I thought that was interesting because again, we don't meet a lot of people in their unfinished form.
yeah,
Right? We meet them in their finished form. And like, oh, they're so smart. They're so smooth. They're such good presenters. But you didn't see them when they were, I mean, I shouldn't pick on him. And I mean this in a complimentary way, but someone will say, oh, you're being snarky. I'm like, no. The first time I met Chase Coleman, he literally looked at his shoes the whole meet. He literally wouldn't eat my eye.
Oh, no.
And now he literally is a master of the universe, one of the most successful investors of all time, and built an amazing business. But, and I'm not criticizing him, but he was a super shy, not really social. It was unnerving for me because I'm like Mr. In Your Face. I mean, I like human contact. He was like looking at his shoes the whole meeting. And so, but in the if you just met him today, oh, he's so smooth. He's such, and then, but people change.
Right.
And I guess those would probably be it. I'm sure there have been plenty of others that were unexpected. We've had, again, people, Mike Cagney, again, just about everything out of his mouth is always unexpected because his brain works so fast.
Sure.
Like, I tell the story. I used to interview for the Robertson Scholars here in North Carolina. And it was four of us would interview 1-on-4. And there was this kid, he was from Maryland, which I found out later why this is. He's from Maryland. And I mean, this kid, he was awesome, right? He was first violin. He was a lacrosse player, 4.0, perfect SATs. And every time someone would start to ask him a question, before they were even done with the question, he's given them the perfect answer.
Sure.
And so I'm like, this kid is amazing. I want to hire. I actually said, don't take scholarship. Just come to work at Morgan Creek. Don't you agree? You're hired. The other three people like hate him. Like, what? Like, he rehearsed everything. Like, think about what you just said. You made up the questions on the spot. And you think he rehearsed the answers?
Right.
Oh, his brain just works so fast. Oh, but he also had a patent on fuel cell technology at 16.
At the ripe old age of 16. He sounds like Doogie Howser, Mark, and that kind of leads into the other thing that wanted to ask you is, what is one guest? We've had a lot of pretty incredible people on the show, but what is one guest you'd literally drop everything, clear the schedule to sit down and interview?
Oh, Pascal. I mean, look, I've said it to many, many, many people that was the single best conversation I've ever had. And I've been involved in both sides as an interviewer and an interviewee on hundreds of podcasts. I don't mean that in a braggadocious way. It's just something I like to talk. And so it's a good medium. So I've been involved in a lot. And look, Pomp's a great interviewer, and there are a lot of great people out there. And not that I've ever been on their show, but the guys, the four guys that David Sachs used to be part of, and that's a great show. There's lots of great people out there, but that conversation with Pascal was, I could have gone on for hours and hours and hours. Now, there are other people.
Yeah. What about somebody new? Somebody who's never been on Digital Currents? Who would you drop everything for if you could get them on the show?
Oh, if we could have somebody.
Somebody new.
Oh, somebody new. Okay, got it. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. I would drop everything. Probably the kid that we invested with, who's doing the photonic chips.
Mm-hmm. So we have the open invitation. I was thinking I was going to probably go with Jensen, since we speak about him so much on the show. They could all wear leather jackets together, and kind of make it a vibe, because we always match, so we have to match.
I mean, look, that would be amazing, and and again, we probably couldn't get it done. But speaking of Jensen, the DeepSeek guy.
Oh yes,
the hedge fund guy at DeepSeek would be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be a get. That would be a serious get. Just to think how the brain functions, to say, you know what, in my spare time, I'm going to build this thing that, the other guy, God rest his soul, that I wish I would have gotten to meet, was Jim Simons. Greatest investor in the history of investing. Full stop.
Yeah.
There's no one even close. And again, you only see the finished product. I mean, if you've read the book about him, he didn't start out small.
Yeah.
And it was kind of rough, and he had the breakup with the partner, and so there's all kinds of stuff that's like, wow. But
that reminds me, well, as you know, we had a record. You and I love space. We talk about it kind of in our spare time. So we had the first all-female crew sent up to space in what was forever, right? And so I look at the who's going to space, Mark, and one of the people that stuck out to me was Katy Perry. And so, I'm thinking, why would she accept this? But, it's pretty clear that, she was a big fan of space. But then the idea to me comes, well, aren't some of these people who are not involved in science scared of this? And then I immediately realized that they would not be, because one of the members of that crew was Jeff Bezos' fiance. Right. So you knew that would be the safest, or either the most unsafe rocket, to the point of unfinished product. Right? So
that's right.
Point,
it's one end of the spectrum.
You'll know 100%. So we'll probably wrap on that point, Mark. And this was a fun episode. We want to wish everybody a good holiday weekend. Enjoy, rejoice, rebirth in your own way, in your thinking, or how we're going to be, come now, the spring, which is what that all represents. And we'll remind our listeners, as always, rate, review, subscribe, check us out on YouTube or wherever you podcast. And we'll remind you to always stay current.
No, thanks, X. I embrace that message and repeat it. Rejoice is exactly the right message for this season. And other than the pollen in North Carolina, it is a season to rejoice. So everybody enjoy the holiday weekend, and we will see you again next week.
Thank you for joining us this week on Digital Currents. Check out our links to our website and social media in the show's description box. Please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
This podcast should not be construed as investment advice nor solicitation for the sale of any security, advisory, or other service. Investment themes and ideas discussed may be owned by funds managed by the host and podcast guests. Any conflicts at the time of production have been mentioned by the host but are subject to change. Listeners should consult their personal financial advisors before making any investment decisions.